People who search Ask Reddit or creepy or unexplained late at night. What's the creepiest story out there? There is one story about some kid having a sleepover in the basement of a rich kid, and he saw a tall, only somewhat human-shaped figure on the basement wall due to the static from the TV. The static turned off, and the kid went back to sleep, only to wake up to the friend's mom screaming. Years later, the friend's mom said she saw a tall, oddly shaped figure in front of her bedroom door. That story first appeared when I was about 12 years old, and it scared me for a whole month and made me extremely paranoid to go to bed without the whole room lit up. I live in England now, but for a few months, I lived in Wales in a really old row of houses that were built for coal miners. The day I moved in, I unpacked all my stuff. It wasn't much. I was only there for 8 months, for work, and went to bed, absolutely cream-crackered. I was laying in bed, just drifting off to sleep, when I heard a knocking sound. I sat bolt upright and started listening for the origins of the knocking. It was a gentle sound at first but got progressively louder. After about 10 minutes of me shitting myself, I located the knocking, which had become a banging by now. It was coming from the ceiling. I went downstairs to get the biggest knife I could find and, apprehensive, climbed into the loft. In my loft was a bloke in his 20s. Turns out that some of those old houses don't have separating walls, so you can move all the way along the row of houses with access to any of them if you cared for it. This was my new workmate's idea of an initiation joke. It almost ended up with one of them getting stabbed, but it still makes me laugh to look back on. You better believe I put a bloody great padlock on the loft hatch the next day, just to be safe. My wife was convinced that someone was living in our old flat when we lived there about 10 years ago. Food was constantly going missing. We are talking weekly tens of pounds of shopping would just disappear. The weird thing was that my wife's stuff started going missing. Started off with makeup. My mom had given her a bag of different kinds of makeup that my aunt got from work. My aunt was a high-up manager for KT, with the things that went missing usually being something that went on her lips or this foundation that she loved. Then it got more sinister. Underwear went missing, her engagement ring disappeared, and items of clothing vanished. Nothing of mine ever went missing. My stuff was more expensive than hers, with the exception of the engagement ring. We moved out about 10 years ago. I expected all the stuff to turn up when the house was empty, but we didn't find any of it. We even lifted the floorboards in the bedroom to see if anything had fallen in there. To this day, I am convinced that someone had a key to our flat and was coming in and stealing things, but my wife had a more active imagination than me, so I thought someone was living in the walls. Because it was a council flat, we weren't allowed to have the locks replaced, but we did it anyway. Wife's dad owns a company that does conservatories, windows, and doors for a living, so we got him to do it for us, and the stuff still continued to vanish. Hasn't happened in the new house. When I was a kid, there was this time at night that my father's car went out of gas in a road, far from any houses, gas stations, or whatever. There were just fields surrounding us. The nearest gas station was maybe half an hour away, by foot. It was dark. There were cars passing by like one every 2 minutes or so. My father tried to ask help doing this sign with his thumb up, like asking for a ride, but as it was night and he was a man, my guess, nobody stopped. It was very cold. We had no mobiles. I tried to get outside so people could see me and maybe help. My father got angry. He told me to stay in the car and wait. He walked to the gas station. When he got back, I remember I was so cold I couldn't feel my feet or hands, and it's sad nobody stopped to help, and so many people went by. But I truly understand how dangerous it is to stop to help in those cases. Who knows? The two stories that got under my skin the most were, I believe, both fiction. The first was the teenagers on the camping trip who had the imposter coming and going. The imposter had a weird smell. The other was a girl staying with family and sleeping on the couch. Something that was assuming similar shapes to her family members, but things were different, like the clothing color or mixing the mom's face with the sister. When it realizes she can see it, it screams and goes to the basement. Those are the only details I remember, and I don't have links, but both really creeped me out. I saw this post about this guy who moved into an old apartment that had some weird shit going on for a while. Things like footsteps and distorted sounds in other rooms, but no one or anything out of the norm was there. A couple of weeks in, this guy gets pretty freaked out and calls some of his friends to check it out with him, but their findings are inconclusive. One night, in bed, he hears a warped music box in his bathroom, or so he describes it. As he gets closer, he hears everyone singing, "Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down." A story of a dude on a road trip with his brother. They go into a Red Robin late at night in a town they've never been before, and everyone recognizes them. Like they just left the diner. When they're obviously confused, everyone acts like the op is just messing with them. Two buddies go camping. In the distance, they hear a voice calling one of their names. The dude shouts back that he's fine, and the voice stops. Greatest regrets thread. One guy confessed to killing an entire family with carbon monoxide poisoning accidentally because he stuffed a rag in the intake while doing maintenance. Another guy said he was playing under his grandpa's truck and snapped something off. Didn't tell anybody. Grandpa gets in the truck and promptly crashes and dies. I have a creepy one from my own life. During my teenage years, I would stay up extremely late playing World of Warcraft, headphones on, my back to the door. My parents had broken up years past, and my dad was basically working nights to pay the bills. He wasn't home this night. It was a bit creepy being home alone, so I would always close the door to my room. Headphones on and forget about being home alone, by speaking to friends in the game. Cut to the middle of the night, I turn off the game to go to bed, where I turn to see the door to my room slightly ajar, the front door to the house wide open, as well as the back door out to the garden. There was no sign of a break-in, but I assumed someone broke in through an unlocked door, heard me speaking, checked me out from behind, and left the house in a hurry. I always double-check the locks after this. There was a story where a friend had invited her friend over for a sleepover. Since it was a single bed, the friend had to sleep at the bottom of the floor beside the bed. The girl woke up in the middle of the night to find her friend standing at the doorway and calling her to go out and get tandoori chicken to eat. When she refused, the friend yanked her hand and pulled away. They went out of the house, and the friend explained she didn't want to get tandoori chicken. She instead pulled her out of her house because she saw a person underneath her bed when she woke up in the middle of the night. It's probably here somewhere, but I read this one where it was from a kid's perspective. It was about 9 at night and someone knocked on the door of their house. The kid's dad goes to open the door, but notices that the security light hasn't been tripped by someone coming up to the door, so he keeps the chain lock on and opens the door just a crack. He can see that there's more than one person there, but they're standing in the shadows, and he can't make out their faces. When he asks who's there, a laughing voice of a girl asks if Kenny is there. Not sure of the name. The dad says there's no one by that name at that house, but the sound of the voice is familiar to the kid. The dad slams the door, makes sure all points of entry are locked, and they go to sleep. In the morning, every house on the block has been broken into and vandalized except for theirs. It turned out to be a group of older kids from school. It may not seem that scary, but the thought of someone deliberately loosening the security light bulb so that you can't see them when you open your door at night freaks me right out. I've got one from the other night actually, here it is. I go on night drives all the time. I feel like it's a healthy way for me to deal with my issues and I feel refreshed when I get home. One of my favorite roads to drive is 68. It takes a little while to get there, but it goes through gorgeous, wooded cliffs and over a river. Anyway, it was Saturday night, and I was going on one of my drives. It was about 11 p.m., so it was pretty much pitch black, except for my headlights. I'm driving through the woods, and just as I get over the bridge, I see a person just standing by the cliff wall. I think, hey, they might have been in a car wreck. This road is pretty dangerous, if you don't know it, and slow down. I roll my window down to ask if they are okay and they just start shrieking. It wasn't some kind of demonic noise, it was obviously human, but it sounded like a person pretending to be a monkey. They've turned around by now, and they've got the craziest look in their eyes. I peel out as quickly as I can, but I think if I hadn't done that, I'd be more scared than I am, because he started coming after my car. I was in Vegas once, sometime around 1996. Our cheap-ass hotel room had a gap under the door, enough to get a few fingers through. I was somewhere around second grade and had brought a Batman action figure to keep me occupied. I ended up sticking him under the door a few times for whatever reason. As I pulled it back in, a hand followed like it was trying to grab it. It moved around like it was feeling for the figurine and then pulled back. I threw the door open, and there was no one there. No doors opening or closing, no elevators or fire escapes near us, not a goddamn sound in that hallway. I still can't figure out how anyone could have disappeared that quick. Even if they sprinted to the room across the hall and the door had been open, I should have heard/seen them closing the door or something. A guy wakes up in a field after a massive drug binge. He was dirty and a complete mess. He decided to make a change and kick his addiction. He went to treatment, got help from his family and friends that previously he had left behind. Slowly, he got better mentally and physically and became sober. After a few months, he got a job, went to college part-time, and got a degree. He then got his dream job with a good salary. At work, he met a girl. Eventually, they bought a house, moved in together. Life is good. He takes the next step. They get married. A few months later, they have a baby boy. His life is what he always wanted. He goes out with some of his friends to celebrate the birth of his son. While out, he meets an old friend in the bathroom. He gets persuaded to try a line of coke for old time's sake. As he takes the line of coke, his head almost explodes with the rush. He blacks out. He wakes up in a field all dirty, feeling like shit. Unfortunately, his life for the last few years was not real. It was all in his mind from a drug-fueled bender. He tries to do exactly what he did in his imaginary life, but he can't kick his drug habit. His family and friends do not help him because he burned all those bridges. He realizes that he can't achieve the life he wants and spirals down. He tries one last time to get clean. This is the story he shares in his group therapy. I was about 8 to 9 years old. I shared a room with my younger brother where the beds were on opposite sides of the room with our heads facing the windows. We lived on a rural farm 3 miles from town. One night I wake up and look at our window to see a tall figure staring into my window. Large head, large black circular eyes, and a thin frame. The figure was very pale. I was frozen in fear and peed myself. I tried not to move. Saw the figure continuing to stare at me. I've never been so terrified. I literally was paralyzed and couldn't move even if I wanted to. Eventually, I called my brother, who looked at it as well. He screamed, and the figure slowly walked away from the window out of our view. My parents came running in to find we had both peed the bed and were talking about some weird man was outside our window. They thought it was a nightmare, but we insisted, but they didn't believe us. Said it was probably from us watching Unsolved Mysteries. Years later, I found out that we lived in a hotspot for UFO sightings. One of them is in the middle of a high school football game with over 2,000 people seeing a UFO do the strangest maneuvers that pilots there reporting to be physically impossible. My mom later was driving her car home when a UFO flew over her car, shutting down the car and making it so she couldn't start it until it had left. Still don't know what to think of it. I've read so many of these, but the two that stand out the most. The Smiley Man, a guy, walking really late at night, down a very quiet, dimly lit street. As he is walking on the sidewalk, he looks ahead and sees another guy coming towards him, walking very weird, almost in slow, steady struts. As he passes the guy, he notices this very crazy smile on his face. Eventually, the smiling guy starts running after him. I believe someone made a YouTube video about this as well. The Cave Adventure. This one is super old, early Reddit days, and a super long read. Two guys go exploring in a cave and end up hearing very strange noises. They both freak out and run out of there. One of them ends up curious and wants to go back days later and record it. Sees something very creature-like. Mine that I've never shared. I'm sure no one would really come across it anyway. So, my friend and I were working on a set for a church when we were 18. We were in this giant sanctuary alone. After casually talking, for some reason, we simultaneously looked up to the balcony, from the stage. And I shit you not. There was a like 7-foot tall, dark shadow with a cowboy hat and a briefcase. He stood still. It felt like time did, too. He was sort of floating for like a few seconds, then rotated slowly and left in some weird type of running. Flash forward exactly 10 years, and I'm in treatment for ED. I met a girl and told her my story. She pulls out a journal, and boom. There it was. She drew the cowboy hat ghost man. I've never met this girl in my life. I'm not even from that town. I just happened to be transferred there. Turns out she has seen the same ghost figure throughout her life. I still talk to these two friends now. But the guy kinda is tight-lipped about ghost-related things now.